Good morning, everybody. Thank you for coming out and joining the East Tennessee Historical Society. I'm Warren Doctor. I'm the President and CEO of the East Tennessee Historical Society. So thank you all. We also have viewers at home because we're shooting this live, which is great. And we have a special guest of honor who came in today, Randy Boyd. So I just want to name check you here. And I also, this is something I learned from him. If you're not a member of the East Tennessee Historical Society, we'd like you to join because I'll always be closing. That's a thumbs up I got from him for you at home. Before we launch into our talk, which we're very excited about, I also want to say if you've not been to see our exhibit, Home Runs and Home Teams about baseball in Tennessee, you really need to go back and see it. It's remarkable. It's all original research, and nobody's really done the history of baseball in Tennessee before. And so when the Smokies came back to Knoxville, we thought it'd be a fantastic opportunity to do that. We've been celebrating the Smokies return with this exhibition. It will continue to be open through, I think, the end of September. And we have some events coming up I'll tell you a little bit about. The first is on September 3rd. Jack Neely is going to be here talking about Knoxville's music history. So that will be good. That will be one of our brown bags that will be at the same time. And then on September 11th, at 10 in the morning, we have our history parlor, which is sort of like our book club, where people come in from the East Tennessee History Center to talk about basically the books that they're reading. And then on September 18th, we have another brown bag. I can see Ed Schaus is here. Hi, Ed. We have a talk called Making Native Borders. Dr. Lucas Kelly has just released a new book that looks at the Chickasaw and Cherokee soldiers and American speculators in the early era of the history. We'll be talking about his new book. And that is from 6 to 7 o'clock at night on September 18th. So we're looking forward to these events. They'll be very good. But before I say anything else, I want to thank our partners, Knoxville Public Libraries, as well as Knoxville Community Media, and First Bank, who sponsor the brown bags. And so, yeah, thank you very much. Just our speaker today, Dr. Amber Roessner, is a professor at the University of Tennessee at the School of Journalism and Electronic Media. Dr. Roessner teaches and studies media history and its relationship to cultural phenomena and its practice like baseball. Dr. Roessner teaches the introduction to journalism and creative media, as well as mass communications history, media reporting, advanced reporting, literary journalism, advanced sports writing, and qualitative, not quantitative, qualitative methods. So without further ado, Dr. Amber Roessner.
Well, thank you all so much for having me here today. I'll try to not put you to sleep on your lunch breaks. Now, I have, I think, a really nice treat for you today. I can't offer you a year-by-year glimpse into the Knox News Sentinel's coverage of baseball and its role in community building, but I've picked out 4 years that I think will really fascinate you. So the first is 1889. Now, this is a year when the Sentinel regularly reported, like other local newspapers and magazines across the country, about the baseball craze that was really kind of getting underway in the nation. But they specifically reported a lot on the local amateur nine in Knoxville, the Knoxville Reds, okay, which was a distant cousin of that first University of Tennessee baseball team that had started in the previous decade. The year 1897 we'll take a look at. It was when the Knoxville Indians claimed the pennant in the newly formed Southern League. That was until the league disbanded about midway through the season. And then you've got the year 1920, which is when the Sentinel offered occasional updates about the Knoxville Giants, who went on to win the Southern Negro League pennant and was narrowly defeated by the Chicago Giants that year. And then finally, the year 1925, when the Knoxville Smokies were established and joined the Sally League. This research was informed by my own lived experience long ago, longer every year. I was a sports reporter at the Gainesville Times in Gainesville, Georgia, and one of the things that I had the opportunity to do was a series about Mill League baseball and looking at the role that sports journalists played in that community and community building, but also some of the tall tales that they told, including that Fidel Castro had sent his son to play near there. And it's also focused on my own research, including research that I did for my first book called Ty Cobb, Christy Mathewson, and the Sporting Press in America, featuring research that I did both at the dissertation stage and then in the first couple of years at the University of Tennessee. So I'm really excited to share a little bit of this research with you. So without further ado, let me take you back to the year 1889. The Knoxville Sentinel had just been established 3 years prior by John Travis Hearn. And they would eventually merge in 1926 and become the News Sentinel. They reported very frequently on the emergence of baseball as the national pastime, but more importantly, they promoted baseball in the community. Noting, and this is from the clip here, that a man or woman, if you please, who doesn't like baseball is not popular in the latter-day society. Note here the reference to women in the national pastime. The Sentinel was an early promoter of lady baseball aficionados and fan clubs. That was actually quite unusual. You didn't really see that. So in publications like the Sporting Life and the Sporting News, they were actively contesting and negotiating the role that women should play in the national pastime. Now, even though sports reporters were thinking about like what role should women play, should they be on the sidelines or should they be playing first base like I did long ago? Of course, women actively competed in the games from its emergence. The Sentinel promoted fan clubs like the Girl Rooters Club of Bearden. If you step right through that door, I believe, you'll actually see into the baseball exhibit, you'll see some of the early records of that Rooter Club. So that's pretty interesting, right? I told you there's some great stuff in that exhibit, all original research, and you should definitely check it out. Who said always be closing? I heard that, and that was a smart idea, President Boyd.
Was it a result of me, by the way?
As the Sentinel noted, though, baseball was all the rage, a national craze, with hundreds of thousands spent daily in attendance upon league and non-league games. But those who could not attend, you know what they did? They read the newspaper. And spaces like the News Sentinel would become one of the key sources of news for this community-building pastime over the next 140 years. Now, I love this. I'm a fan of architecture, and when I first moved here, the Barber homes I became really fascinated with. So the Sentinel, like other newspapers of the era, engaged in promotion of baseball alongside the development of Knoxville. This January 1889 ad for a Knoxville real estate company offers insight into how the development of new communities such as Elmwood Park along Magnolia Avenue and overlooking Knoxville emphasize its proximity in walking distance to local baseball grounds. Once a biracial community known as Shieldstown, Park City as it became known, now the area that we refer to as Park Ridge, featured the area's first electric trolley, many homes eventually of George F. Barber, and later in 1917 became the eventual site of Knoxville's Caswell Park, which was donated to the city by the early baseball player William Caswell and became home to minor league games for over 8 decades. Over those 8 decades, minor league and Negro League teams played at the site, and professional baseball stars who later joined the ranks of the National Baseball Hall of Fame, including Babe Ruth, Lou Gehrig, Satchel Paige. They played exhibitions on the field. Okay. The Sentinel, so remember now, we're still in 1889, all right? The Sentinel followed closely the Knoxville Reds, the local amateur nine. They were not in Henry Grady's Southern League, but they did convincingly defeat the Southern League Chattanoogan's on several occasions that season, and the Sentinel boasted, "Imported professionals do not lend the same flavor to the sport as our own amateurs. Bully for the Reds." The Sentinel regularly reported on the amateur Reds, namely the National League and on the amateur Reds, but they also reported on developments in the emerging professional leagues, namely the National League and the American Association. They also reported on the emergence of the color line in baseball and traveling semi-professional all-women exhibition teams. We'll take a closer look at some of that coverage, but first I want to offer a little bit of context. African American men and women had been playing baseball since the origination of the game, but the rampant racism and sexism of the day would contribute to the emergence of the color line in 1889, which prohibited men of color from playing in Major League Baseball, and common understandings that ladies should only engage in the game from the bleachers alongside their male chaperones. I know, life was so different. I don't know that I would have made it back in 1889, you all. I just don't know. In the photograph at the far left, you'll see the Young Ladies Baseball Club, a semi-professional nine that toured the country throughout the decade. Semi-professional stars like these, who dared to upend era gender norms, often had their sexuality called into question in national sports magazines such as Sporting Life and Sporting News. Now, let's take a look at how the Sentinel covered emerging stories around women and black men who were increasingly excluded from playing the national pastime. As you'll see here in this slide from March 1889, the Sentinel included a report about the color line bobbing up unpleasantly. As the reporter noted, a handful of black players who played in the American Association earned fame and prominence despite disheartening race prejudice, which ultimately prompted one of the most famous men in baseball, Chicago manager Cap Anson, to demand that the color line be drawn. Not until 1947 would another African American man be permitted to compete in Major League Baseball. But that didn't stop local men of color from playing the game they loved. And to its credit, the Sentinel regularly covered local black clubs, as this report from 1897 indicates. They recognized that their readers craved all local baseball, which prompted them to both advertise and cover exhibition games by teams of color and also women. And you'll see now their feature about an all-women's team in October of 1889. As the Sentinel reported, an all-women's nine from Chicago made arrangements to play a local team formed by the McClungs. The newspaper reported that the female club has been playing ball for 4 seasons, and they thoroughly understand their business as they've defeated a number of good nines. And they encouraged attendance at 25 cents per ticket, by noting there is no doubt that the park will be crowded for such a game as this promises to be was never witnessed in Knoxville. That was a little clunky writing there. I might use my red pen there. Local women, most prominently Doris Sams and Cartha Doyle, who you see in the slide, continued to play the sport on semi-professional teams, only for a brief moment having the chance to play in the major leagues in the All-American Girls Professional Baseball League in the 40s. So, once again, you see kind of Knoxville's embrace of women and people of color and its inclusivity throughout this time period that we're looking at. The Sentinel continued to follow and promote its local clubs, which included the Knoxville Indians, the first professional minor league team to be established in Knoxville, playing in the Southern League as a successor to the early Southeastern League. Charlie Moffat's Indians, according to the Sentinel, expected to have the best obtainable team to come here and start the ball rolling. After all, as a reporter from the Sentinel noted, Knoxville people know good ball when they see it, and nothing else will suit them. I think that remains true some 140 years later. Knoxville had boasted one of the best independent amateur teams in the nation in the previous decade, and true to the Sentinel's boasting, the Indians delivered a knockout record of 22 wins and just 10 losses before the league ultimately disbanded in May, and in doing so, they earned their first professional pennant. So this was 1897. Now we'll shift ahead. This image is actually from the book that I wrote, Inventing Baseball Heroes. Baseball reporters like the ones at the Sentinel encouraged the nation's baseball fever. In 1911, this is the image featured here, the press box at the Polo Grounds, that was in New York, was filled to capacity as New York-based beat writers such as Grantland Rice from Nashville battled with the likes of player, author, writers such as Ty Cobb to file their stories. They watched as the Philadelphia Athletics that year beat Christy Mathewson's New York Giants 4-2. At both the national and local levels, reporters engaged in crafting heroes of the diamond that signified what it meant to be American. As I suggest in Inventing Baseball Heroes, they became cultural types that offered insight into common sense understandings about morality, masculinity, manliness, modernity, and success. From the earliest days of professional baseball, club owners understood how local newspapers might promote the sport as a wholesome national pastime. With this in mind, they encouraged their club secretaries, like modern-day sports information personnel, to write and to wire over late-breaking scores and stats. Local newspapers, too, understood the importance of delivering breaking news to their audiences. With this in mind, the Sentinel, like many newspapers across the country, shared live news with community audiences through bulletin diamonds. I love these things. By the way, this is also in the exhibit outside, so make sure to check this out. In fact, I'm just going to tell you, you can take the whole rest of the afternoon off if you promise, this is a pinky swear promise, to see that exhibit and then go see the Smokies play tonight. Does that sound good? Are you okay with that, System President Boyd? All right. So these bulletin boards, though, they were mechanical scoreboards like the one featured above. They were updating the game constantly based on newswire reports. For those who couldn't make it to the ballpark, watching the local newspaper diamond or listening in or watching at local bars became community rituals encouraged by local newspapers, such as the Sentinel, who reported about how businesses and baseball-crazed communities like Knoxville shut down early to support local nines. So now I'm going to take you up to 1920. By this year, the Sentinel had developed a modern sports section. It's kind of cool, I think, to see the variations in what the sports page looked like over these years that I'm kind of highlighting for you today. You can check them out yourself if you visit the local library site. You have access to really check out all the history you want, right? And I'll show you that at the very end of the presentation. But in 1920, we had a very modern sports section with the MLB wire, recaps, features, standings, and of course, local news that were focused on the town's two professional teams, the Pioneers, which were soon to become the Smokies, and the Giants of the Negro Southern League. Now, shortly after Andrew Rube Foster created the Negro National League in February of 1920, the Knoxville Giants became a founding team of the Negro Southern League. Under the secretary, Professor William Brooks, a well-respected educator and community leader here in town, the Giants quickly signed players like One Wing Maddox. Man, I love a good nickname. A one-arm pitcher who lost his left arm in childhood. As the Beck Center notes, the Giants had incredible support from the local black community. But in an era of segregated baseball, the club enjoyed an integrated audience in their stands and regular coverage in the Sentinel as they ran more than 100 pieces. Now, that prior year, 1919, they had only ran a handful of pieces about the local black club. Of course, that was the same year that coverage in the Sentinel had sparked one of a series of what became known as race riots and the Red Summer across the country. The Knoxville Giants had a strong debut season in 1920. They opened the NSL with a 6-2 win over Nashville on April the 29th. They go on to win 100 games that season, and ultimately they claim the NSL pennant, led by Still-Arm Dickey, who logged a 25-game winning streak, and behind the bat of Ralph Pete Klieg. Their prowess on the field definitely caught the eye of the Sentinel, who offered regular updates by early June. And you can gain a sense of their frequent updates in these two pieces that mention the club's stars, including String Bean Moore and One Wing Maddox. As Knoxville News Sentinel reporter Adam Sparks recently noted, a racially segregated crowd surrounding a Knoxville baseball diamond shared a collective jaw drop when one arm player made a diving catch just short of the center field wall. Cheers erupted when he sprang to his feet, flipped the ball, shed off his glove, caught the ball again, and tossed it in the infield with one seamless motion. Black fans already knew his name. White fans had only heard tall tales. Neither could believe what they saw when on June the 4th, 1920, Forrest One Wing Maddox became an overnight sensation for the Giants as he hit 3 hits and made 2 acrobatic catches in the 9th inning and threw out 2 opposing runners. It was perhaps the first sign that something special was in store for one of Knoxville's earliest professional baseball teams. By June the 16th, the Sentinel staff were definitely believers, reporting that the Giants were leading contenders for the NSL pennant. The Giants did not disappoint local audiences. After all, black players had been fielding teams under the Giants' name on and off for more than a decade and had been actively playing baseball in the area since the time of the Civil War. In September, the Knoxville Journal listed the Giants with a 52-21 record and the Montgomery Gray Sox with a 47-39 record in the final league standings. All right, so now I kind of tripped up on this. I'm sorry, y'all. But basically, record keeping was still a little sloppy in that era. And that Alabama team, you know how we hate Alabama in this state. They said that the pennant was in dispute. But the manager of the Giants very savvily wired ahead to work out a Negro League World Series between the National League and the Southern League. So in September, the deal was done, and the Chicago American Giants, managed by Rube Foster, played the Knoxville Giants. Chicago newspapers then ultimately recognized Knoxville as the true pennant winner in the Southern League Championship, rather. And ultimately, The Chicago team did a tour of southern cities like Montgomery, Birmingham, Chattanooga, and Knoxville. It beat everyone soundly, unfortunately, even including the Knoxville Giants. The World Series matchup, however, solidified Knoxville's title as the inaugural Southern League champion to anyone outside of Alabama. The Giants' popularity had skyrocketed. Crowds at games grew from a few hundred to about 3,000 during that first season. As the Beck Exchange Center notes, and these are images from their online repository, the season that followed brought both highs and lows for the Giants. A few key players left to join other league teams and pursue new opportunities, and maintaining the competitive edge became difficult. By the end of the 1922 season, the Giants had withdrawn from the Negro Southern League, but they continued playing as an independent team. Following the 1922 season, and driven by their unwavering passion for baseball, they continued to play independently here. Okay. Now, I want to also point out another, it's like, why don't we just walk through the exhibit? We practically should. We should have done the talk there. I want y'all to be sure to check out, there's an interview with Bill Landry and 3 players from the Negro Southern League and the Giants here, Ralph Banks, Ernest Waters, and Leroy Bowerman. They played for the 1933 Giants. They played to integrated audiences, and the News Sentinel offered frequent coverage because, as those individuals put it, Knoxville knew and appreciated good baseball. Now, I shared with you all just a glimpse into the Sentinel coverage here in 1920, but if you want to learn more about the extraordinary Giants, please check out the Beck Cultural Center's exhibit, both online or in person. Okay, now we're going to flash forward again. This is my 4th year. This presentation had to end sometime, right? Despite a disastrous season opener that left the Knox News staff soon to merge with the Sentinel, warning of a jinx, and considering whether local Knoxville City League pitchers might offer a better alternative to the minor league clubs, formerly called the Pioneers, local fans remain committed to the team, win or lose. Okay, so the key sentiment that I'm trying to express here, though, I guess I should have just had a sip of my water so that I wouldn't get all tongue-tied. That's acceptable, right, at a brown bag luncheon, right? In fact, where's my quarter pounder? Just teasing. Sorry about that, you all. What I was trying to say, not very effectively, was that the News Sentinel here was warning of a jinx, right? And they said anybody in our local league teams, because remember, Knoxville had always had very good amateur teams, could do better than the semi-professional player we have right now, right? So they were kind of undercutting the local team there a little bit. This was the inaugural Smokies team. They were formerly called the Pioneers. But despite their really rough year, the other really important point that I want to share with you is that this community loved this team, win or lose, right? And I think that that's true of Knoxville as a community and all of its sports teams. We love the people who go out there and give their all for Tennessee no matter what, right? The Smokies would encounter more losses than wins, unfortunately, with a record of just 44 wins and 85 losses, as they took 8th place in the Southern Atlantic Association. However, loyal fans were finally rewarded with a win in early July, and local newspaper reporter Bob Wilson contended that this new pitcher, Phil Sawyers, who finally ended the club's losing streak, would hold a place very dear in the hearts of local fans for a long time. While national reporters had their eyes trained on the Scopes trial down in Dayton, local reporters offered local readers with the news that they craved. As I said, wins were more infrequent that year. Smokies fans did have the opportunity that year to watch the New York Yankees play the Brooklyn Dodgers at Caswell Park, and 3 years later for the Smokies to engage in an exhibition game with the Yankees. But unlike 1889, when the Sentinel noted the local nine could have beaten anyone in the country, the Smokies lost to the Yankees 14-4 at Caswell Park. The Yankees were, of course, led by Babe Ruth and Lou Gehrig, who would go on to win the World Series that year. A very good image of Babe Ruth when he was touring through Knoxville can also be seen in the exhibit next door. Now, in conclusion, because I do hope to have some time for question and answers, the Knox News Sentinel has played a really pivotal role, not in merely covering the region's craze with baseball, but also in helping define the central place of baseball in this community and in determining how we engage with the national pastime then, now, and for years to come. So if you ever find yourself wanting to dig into Sentinel baseball coverage, consider checking out the Knoxville News Sentinel Historical Archive on Newsbank at the local public library. And you should definitely check out a game, as we are doing on Friday night. This is my son. And if you're interested in learning more about this presentation or about my first book, feel free to reach out to me at the University of Tennessee. You can also, if you are so interested, purchase the book today or through Amazon. All right, that's all that I have for you. What do you have for me in terms of questions? Yeah.
You said the sports page began in 1920?
No, I said that by 1920 that the Sentinel, soon to merge and become the News Sentinel, had a very modern looking sports page. So I'll just show you the slide. That might be easier just to see. This is 1920.
And okay, so when did the sports page begin? Newspapers here.
Newspapers in general?
In Knoxville.
Well, so in Knoxville, the Sentinel had a sports page in 1889, and it was established in 1886, 3 years prior. So it was always a part of the local newspaper here.
And, I'm sorry.
Oh, no. Well, what I was going to say, though, is the 1870s, the era of new journalism, would have been the first instance of national newspapers across the nation having regular sports sections. And actually, based on my research, the Philadelphia Ledger had one of the very first sports departments in 1879, I believe.
Okay.
Yeah.
So
it's not bad for off the top of my head.
So the sports pages were just about were beginning
at the very early stages.
Knoxville was there with it.
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
Now, coverage was mostly what, UT?
Well, so that's a great question. So early baseball coverage, what did it look like? So first of all, in 1889, most newspapers were just starting to develop a sports section. Prior to that time, sports events in general were leisure pursuits, and they weren't regular enough to have a regular sports section. So you would just see kind of notices about a cricket match. For my next presentation, we'll find out that cricket was the national pastime before baseball, but that's another day. That's if you buy me a cup of coffee later. I'm just teasing. But they were kind of infrequent. By the 1880s, you have more frequent kind of sports sections. And you have stories about if there are local amateur teams. So remember too, 1876 is when you see the first professional baseball league. Prior to that, it was all amateur, right? And that's why you have that bit in terms of the coverage of Knoxville boasting, like, we have the best amateur team and we can beat anyone, professional or amateur, across the country. See, but at that time, it was kind of seen as a negative thing to be a professional club or to, It kind of sullied everyone's character, the give and take and exchange of money. Now, I'll finish answering your question with one or two other points. So you had updates about, local amateur nines, but as we were talking about before the presentation, you also had some updates of like local preachers not wanting people to play baseball, right? But this was about the time I found a really interesting piece. A local pastor here came around and started supporting baseball and actually had it to be a part of the Sunday picnic that he was holding. Now I see a question right there. Yeah.
My name is Jeff Tallman. I grew up in Asheville, North Carolina, which is
Sure.
referenced here. My late grandfather was part owner of the Asheville Tourists.
I've seen them play. They were a lovely team.
I grew up behind home plate, questioning the eyesight and judgment of officials.
Like all good fans.
Say again?
I said like all good fans.
We are appropriately celebrating the return of baseball to Knoxville, and it's such exquisite attention to detail. The fact that we've got pretentious beer, wicked weed at the National Brewery. Thank you for the attention to detail, Randy. I live in the 4th and Gill neighborhood, where I also have the pleasure of having Randy's sons as neighbors, which is a neighborhood which has embraced baseball. So there's a history here that needs to be looked at, and that's why we lost baseball at all, for it to return. And I hope this chapter will excite your journalistic curiosities. In about 1997, the out-of-state owned Don Beaver in Hickory, North Carolina, owned the baseball team, and their view was the Bill Myers Stadium was derelict. It was in a bad part of town. Wink, wink, nod, nod. We can go through all the euphemisms about a bad part of town. Those of us in urban neighborhoods who embrace living with, working with, coexisting with people of all stripes and stations, we reached out to the Smoky, to Don Beaver, and said, we understand the facility is derelict. We appreciate your interest in making it updated and modern, but we've got a vision for this part of town. Keep in mind, baseball is only 70 home games a year. If you're going to make the investment, it needs to pay dividends every other day of the year. So the reality is, and you can go to the Sentinel's coverage of this, some of it was not very flattering. You can go to headline in the paper, the premium to utilizing Bill Myers Stadium, you would have to move First Creek. Well, we've demonstrated the current stadium embraces First Creek. Bill Myers just upstream on First Creek. Anyway, the level of dishonesty in terms of really looking at what could be done with a piece of property the taxpayers already own, where the citizens wanted the investment. Now, those of us in Park Ridge and 4th and Gill, we reached out to black leadership in Knoxville because we said, this partnership between white people and black people in the urban core is critical to the future of the community. Forget about baseball. That's just a side. Anyway, we were rebuffed. And all you have to do is look at the coverage in yesterday's city council meeting in terms of the frustrations for the failure of activity on Magnolia Avenue. This is not old news. This is right out of today's. And all you have to do is look at the burnout of the Standard Knitting Mill, looming like this part of town, like Dracula's Castle. That's a souvenir from this chapter of a failure of leadership and imagination in Knoxville. Ed Schaus was on council. He knows all about it. He's a baseball fan. Bill Lyons and John Shebb at the Baker School, they were paying attention to it. In fact, they were doing surveys on the stuff. I hope you'll look at this. This is a really big deal. And it's not just about the box scores of baseball, but it's about our imagination and how we work together to create a great city.
Yeah.
So I would hope you pursue it further.
Well, I will definitely keep that in mind. So you'll notice my presentation ended in 1925. I didn't dig any more towards the future. But what I think maybe separated city leaders in Knoxville it really from the 1880s up until that period of time was they really saw baseball being foundational to community building. And based on what you're saying, it sounds like that understanding of the fundamental role that sport can play in community building was kind of lost along the way by mid 20th century. So I really appreciate that comment. The other thing that I will say that really struck me based in my own research. So my existing research really concentrates on the period between 1870, really when early baseball leagues were coming into being, right, and 1920. And what struck me about that differentiated the coverage that we would see here in Knoxville from some of the other cities across the country was just how inclusive in mind Knoxville was for who could be an active participant in the game. You really didn't see that everywhere, and that's really notable. My plan, because here at the University of Tennessee, we're always trying to push our research forward, is to send this off. There's something called the Cooperstown Symposium. I've presented there before, and I'm hoping to maybe send this off in the next year or two there. So we'll see what happens with it. But I appreciate the encouragement about continuing in this line of research.
To embellish his comments briefly, our 7-2 vote on council minister became 2-7. And that's 25 years ago, but thanks to Boyd Sports, we have it back. Back halfway through your presentation, the Giants were in Asheville. It references 17 safeties. What is this? I'm not familiar with safety in baseball.
Which, was it in the 1920s? It was about the Giants?
Let's see. The Giants collected 17 safeties.
Oh.
Fourth line.
Yeah. Well,
What's a slab on it?
Safety in baseball, I don't know.
I think that just means hit.
Pitcher. Oh, that must be bases.
yeah.
Hits.
Would it be 17 safeties off their opponent's slab artist? So slab artist would definitely be pitcher. The safeties maybe safely getting to base, if I had to guess. But it's interesting to see the other thing I love about looking at sports writing over time is just the change in lingo, right? So I'm sure y'all are all familiar with Grantland Rice, who we still love him, even though he went to Vanderbilt. One of the notable things about sports reporting when he was engaged in the practice was everyone wrote poetry in their sports reporting, right? And that was really true until I would say about the 1920s. You saw a lot of poetry in sports writing. Yeah.
Apparently a safety is if the runner safely makes it to base.
So I was right, yeah.
Between bases.
I got it.
First one to second, yeah.
Yeah.
You're right.
But now we know for sure. I was making a good historic guess, with my boss watching. I didn't want to get it wrong. All right.
You see a change from baseball spelt?
Yeah. So
When and why?
when and why. Now, I don't know the why. The when, you really don't see it starting to be together as one word until the early 20th century. So all of the 19th. So and that's so key. You raise a really good point. I do a lot of full text searchable database. So all of this was, I think I used ProQuest historical newspapers and looked specifically at the Knox News, which we have at the University of Tennessee. You need to know some of that sometimes to be able to pull all of the articles. Yeah. So. Yeah, learned that along the way. Sir?
It's maybe outside your primary research interest, but I've been reading a lot about sports history, and I was struck by the fact that, now you tune in the TV on Saturday afternoons and talk about Knoxville being a football town. But I talked to older people, and they would listen to the Smokies games in the 40s and 50s.
Yeah.
I don't think the Ball Network was even formed about 1960. I just wondered, when did this transition occur?
Well,
We went
so
from being a
you're-
baseball town to a football.
So you're hitting, I think, on the right time period, right? And it to some extent, remind me of your name, sir, I'm sorry. Jeff. To some extent, it gets at what Jeff was saying. So this idea that some of the city support for semi-professional baseball really is lost in that era. But also what's happening in the middle of the 20th century is in the South, college football becomes the national pastime, right? And that's pretty true all over the South, even in Athens where I grew up. I thought I'd work. I was trying to decide how I would work that in today. I decided to work it in that way. I tell my students, up front, I tell my students that every first day of class. I said, y'all might not love me when y'all find out, so I'm just going to let y'all know. But they still seem to love me anyway, so. All right. Yes?
So do you feel that modern coverage, so you're talking about building community through local coverage of baseball, do you feel like the modern coverage of baseball gives the local community sense that it did in older writings?
That's a really good question. You know what, I would actually probably say that no, I would say no to that. I've never really thought a lot about that. But I mean, I think you get good local coverage of high school and college sports across the country. But for professional teams, I think you sometimes see more investigative reporting in the modern era than you did certainly during this period of time. Yeah, but that too is to do with a lot of the publishers of the local newspapers at that time were key city promoters. So they were kind of, so someone like Silas Bent, I know I'm giving you no context for who this person is, but that's a great name, Silas Bent. He was a key newspaper editor in the 20s, and he called sports reporting, he was a critic of sports reporting and some types of reporting in general. He called it all ballyhoo. He basically said it was just all promotional coverage. And to some extent, he was right? The whole sports page is a little bit of a promo.
Well, the Smokies has certainly, present one has certainly enjoyed page one.
Now, that is definitely true.
That is certainly different from what you've been telling me.
That's definitely true. That's definitely true.
Now, how much is that helping to build the community's interest? I'd like to know what you think about that.
A quick plug for Joel Christopher at the Knoxville News Sentinel. Things have been just night and day this season. He had a young man named Gabe Jackson, who is one of UT's alums, that headed up coverage of the Knoxville News, of the Knoxville Smokies, starting at the beginning of the season. He did a fantastic job, and I think he really did work hard at making the connection to the community, to the history. It wasn't just the hits and strikes and home runs. It was about the community and the relationships with the players. And sadly, we were just discussing, he just transferred to Atlanta to take a new job about 3 weeks ago. So I'm hoping that covered that same
But then
spirit.
they've also gotten into the issues with having to change the grounds for the different games. So it hasn't been all just about baseball.
Yeah.
So we've learned a lot about what's happening at that
It's
state.
the News Sentinel.
Oh, that's
What,
for
2
sure.
weeks ago, and the Sunday paper had a whole pull out just on the
Right.
Knoxville Giants, which was great.
Yeah, I saw that as well. The other thing that I think that the Sentinel has done a good job of is, and that, to praise you as well, President Boyd, is thinking about partnerships. So I was really impressed with the partnership that you had with the Beck Cultural Center to raise awareness of the Knoxville Giants, which were such an important team in this community's history. And I really appreciate that.
And I'd like to say one other thing
Yeah.
about page one coverage, and I'm very biased on this.
Now, this is former newspaper reporter Georgiana
No, but
Vines.
you get pushback also from readers who aren't interested in sports about
Yeah.
it on page one, So publishers and editors have to weigh it.
Yeah.
I just wanted to.
Publishers and editors and also university presidents, they all have it rough. But that's the lesson for today. That's why we're all going to take the afternoon off and go see the exhibit and enjoy the Smokies game. I'm just teasing. A question on the end.
I read an interesting article a few days ago about how baseball brings communities together, but how it fights loneliness.
Yeah.
And the article said that the Surgeon General has now said that loneliness is at an epidemic stage in America.
Yeah.
And how people going to baseball games, everybody's friendly at a baseball game.
Uh-huh.
And it said especially the Savannah Bananas.
Oh, my goodness. The Savannah Bananas.
Everybody there, it's like the Globetrotters. Everybody there's
Yeah.
just to have fun.
If you can get a ticket to the Savannah Bananas, that's the hardest ticket in the nation, I think.
Like I go to the Smokies game.
Yeah.
And I have to say, everybody there is friendly that works there.
Well, let me,
It's a pleasant experience. If you're single, lonely, go to a baseball game.
that's right. So what, I'll just echo this, America's friendliest ballpark. But then I'll say this too about, I think a lot of that has to do with the pace of baseball, right? And also, sure, there are rivalries in baseball, like, Cubs and the Cardinals, right? But there's also more time to kind of engage with the person beside you. So I tossed up this picture for a reason. I had my kiddo at a San Francisco Giants game just a couple of weeks ago. And I thought this was magical. He loves to try to get a baseball, okay? He is fast becoming one of the biggest baseball card and ball collectors in town, I think. But the reason I bring this up, he in order to try to go get the baseball and be in the right strategic spot, he had to try to sit on the edge of the row. Well, I said, okay. Every person he sat beside, they ended up talking to him. They talked about the history of baseball. And it was just really remarkable, right? Like the way in which folks were engaging. And I'll tell this last story about him. He ended up getting 3 balls at that Giants game. Now that's more than he's gotten anywhere else. But you know what he ended up doing with 2 out of the 3 of those balls? He gave them to other children. One was like a little 6-year-old behind us. The other was a 2-year-old going to their first game. And I mean, I don't know. That's just me as a proud mom. Sorry, you all. But I do think it speaks to the beauty of community building and baseball. He's leaving. He's fleeing my stories of the proud mom. I'm just teasing.
Yeah, I think a lot of I second a lot of what everybody said today about the community, and baseball bringing the community together. But I think as far as the past is concerned, the divisions between black and white here in Knoxville, in the South, in Tennessee, wherever, it is persistent, and it's not going to change. Thankfully, the times have changed. You can't go back to 1920 with Caswell Park because it was black and it was white. There were not the community. There was no community. Today there's a community where back in 1920 there was no community here. I mean, you talk about the Giants. What happened to their coverage in the newspaper after they left the league?
Now that's an interesting question.
As opposed to the Smokies coming in at Caswell Park and,
Yeah. Well, I mean, so I didn't look at other years than 1920 in relation to the Sentinel and the Giants. It's interesting because the Giants at one point that summer, though, and the Sentinel was getting more coverage than the Pioneers. And that, I think, really goes to show you kind of the way in which they were catching on as they were becoming the NSL pennant leaders. In 1919, as I noted, there was just a handful of articles about the local black club in the Sentinel. I would be interested to see what happened after 22 when they drop out of the. Y'all are giving me all kinds of additional future research. Future research. I appreciate that. I'll be okay for a few more years with my annual performance review if I stick to this line of research. Well, thank y'all so much for being here today. I really appreciate it. This topical matter is near and dear to my heart. This book is too. I sent it to President Carter to get an interview with him, and it worked. So he said he enjoyed the book. So if he enjoyed it and you want to purchase it, then by all means. If not, feel free to reach out to me at this email address. Thank you so much. Thank you.